Welcome into College Football Smothered and Covered. Beautiful Tuesday afternoon here in Atlanta, gearing up for SEC Media Days. And we're going to talk a little bit about that. Cole Cubelic, Mac and Cube on WJOX in Birmingham every morning. He'll join us a little bit later in the show to talk everything SEC college football, span the globe with him. And, of course, we will wrap things up with there's a kid out there who's maybe want to stay in the spotlight a little too much. Who? We'll talk about that a little bit later in the show. Hey, the show brought to you by Bet Online, whether it be live lines, odds, futures, news, everything over at Bet Online. They have you covered. Go to Bet Online, sign up, get 50% off your first deposit of up to $250. That is by using the promo code BLEAV, BLEAV. That's right. $50 in free play first deposit up to $250. They do a great job over there, so go to Bet Online. Bet Online, you can see their logo. It's right there. Bet Online. Fancy new graphic. Go to Bet Online. The game starts here. And you know what? If you're gonna hang out in the casino, you need to have a tumbler. Right there, Smothered and Covered. You can get this tumbler. Smothered and Covered store. It's in the description below. Can see it on YouTube, Rumble, Apple, Spotify. There's a link right below where this graphic is if you're watching online. If you're listening, you should watch it on YouTube as well. But go to the College Football Smothered and Covered store. Gear up before the college football season. Joined now by a guy that I've known for, how long have I known you, Cole? 24, 25 years? It seems like seems like a long time. We had hair. Both of us had hair when we were at Auburn. Now neither of us do.
Yeah, that was a while back. I didn't have hair most of the time at Auburn, but a little bit. Yeah.
That's true. So you, of course, you cover the SEC primarily, but you also do all kinds of stuff with your show there in the morning on WJOX. But I guess first, let's stay in your neck of the woods with Alabama. What should the expectations be? Because I've said a lot that if anybody comes out and says they have a definitive opinion on Alabama one way or the other, then that person's a liar, because there's no blueprint to replace the greatest of all time.
No, there's definitely not. But I think one thing you can definitively say is that Karen DeBoer is a great football coach. Yes. I think he put a really good staff together. The fact that he went and got a couple of other active head coaches to come be a part of his staff, I think is going to help him. He's got some guys with SEC experience there, and they kind of know the ins and outs of that facility and how it's going to operate. And then I think the other thing you can definitively say is that they do have talent. Now, are they the most talented roster in the league? No, I don't think so anymore. There may be two, maybe three teams that have more talented rosters top to bottom. Doesn't mean those teams are going to be better, but you got a really talented quarterback, some talented tailbacks. I think you're going to have a really good middle of your offensive line with the two guards and Brailsford coming in at center. I think you're going to have some guys on defense that can make plays, specifically one at safety, if not two. Yes. And then you're going to have a couple linebackers that can make plays. You have some different concerns than you've had in the past. You don't have a lot of the secondary that's going to be on the same page that have all played together. You don't have depth at linebacker like normally Alabama would have. And I'm not sure they're going to be as active up front defensively. Jaheim Otis might end up having a big year. He's been solid, but is he as scary as some of the other Alabama defensive linemen we've seen? No, not really. But it's not like they're super deficient at any position either. There's not going to be a spot where you look at it and say, man, they're just a D- there, and there's nothing they can do about it. So we don't know. You say that we don't know about them. I think it's interesting because we don't know a lot about the tackle position, and I include Caden Proctor there because he didn't go through spring practice. So it's hard for me to imagine him just automatically being better when he didn't get reps and he didn't go play and he wasn't working out a lot of the time because he's moving back and forth. Wide receiver, we've seen the little bits and pieces, but we don't know that this is going to be a real scary group. I think you got a strong tight end group, strong group of linebackers, some key players in the secondary with a little bit of a different defense that'll handle some coverage in different ways that could make them a really good football team. So I like the way some of the bigger games are spread out on their schedule. Yes, and I think it wouldn't surprise me if they go undefeated in the regular season. It wouldn't surprise me if they lost 2 in the regular season.
I think it's interesting because when you look at Washington last year, it was Penix over the top. And I think a lot of the focus was on Penix, but he also had 3 superstars outside. And you mentioned the wide receivers. Because, Jalen Milroe does a lot of what Michael Penix was successful with and what Kalen DeBoer has done. Jalen Milroe completed deep balls. That was what he was good at, as long as he didn't hold the ball for too long. Does Alabama have those? Anything close to those guys?
No, not close to what they had last year. I do think Jeremy Bernard can be a down the field threat, but not from maybe a speed perspective, more of a catch radius, use his big body, be able to go attack the football. I think this will be a little bit different. I think they believe they can run the football. And keep in mind, Dylan Johnson had a hell of a year for Washington last year, and that offensive line won the Joe Moore Award. So I think you can have a good offensive line. Like I said, need some help at tackle probably. You could have Jay Miller, Justice Haynes, both could be great tailbacks in different ways. So that gives you the option to play some two back and move some pieces around. I think you have 3 tight ends that can play. That gives you some formation options. And then you just hope that, Kendrick Law, Kobe Prentice, one of these guys steps up and is more of a go-to threat down the field. So the receiving core is very different. But also the thing that everybody got scared when, Scott Huff didn't come along or Ryan Grubb didn't come along. Kalen can run this offense. Kalen he can call the offense. He's called it before. It's his offense. And whether it's been Jake Haener or Michael Penix, it's been successful. And it's going to continue to be successful. And I think mainly because it doesn't have to be one thing. If they need to be run heavy, they're going to go out and they'll run the football 35, 40 times. If they need to throw it deep 16, 20 times a game, they'll do that. So it's not an offense that I think is very stubborn at its core. It's one that wants to set you up for different things. It'll take what you give them, and then it'll try to attack you where you don't want to try to play them the most. So I have a lot of confidence that if Jalen Milroe is consistent, and probably needs to be a little more consistent in this offense than he's been in the past, because I don't know if this offense is going to allow him to run around quite as much as he did last year. Also, keep in mind, Barrett, last year, that offense was kind of like, remember the old He-Man character Manny faces where you could twist his head and his face just kept turning? That was kind of Alabama's offense last year. They changed personalities 3, maybe 4 times. You said it before. They were a shot play offense for a little while. They tried to be a ground and pound offense and hand the ball off, and then they kind of turned into a quarterback run-heavy offense. And then I think towards the end of the year, they took the best of all those worlds and tried to mix them together to be what they could be most successful with. So he's going to have to be a little bit more consistent in the intermediate stuff, I think, if this offense is really going to go.
Yeah, I agree. You look at – that's what it's so interesting about this team is because on paper – Jalen can be Michael Penix, but it's so much more complicated. I think the one thing, though, that is going to remain the same with Alabama is that Nick Saban had this sort of, reputation of being stubborn. He was far from that. And I think having the ability for Karen DeBoer to come in and say, hey, I'm going to put my fingerprint on this, but you guys are going to dictate what actually happens here is very important. And I think, we've seen this in the past with coaches. You have to be true to yourself. If you're fake, if you're Will Muschamp trying to be Nick Saban at Florida, things are gonna fall apart. But it does seem like Kalen is mixing the best of both worlds, which I think is very interesting and what Alabama needs. So let's go a little further southeast in your state, and that is Auburn. And look, Peyton Thorne, I think that Hugh got a little too married to him with some comments during the first transfer portal period. He's going to have to be more consistent because at times it looked like he was completely lost. Like he had the yips for a pitcher that can't find the strike zone at all, but he has had success. When you look at their offensive line being successful and the upgrade at wide receiver, upgrade at offensive line and wide receiver, what is the ceiling for this offense? Because I've always said with Hugh, he was successful with Bo Wallace, Chad Kelly, Malik Willis. It's not like he needs high-end quarterback talent. He just needs a little bit more than competent quarterbacks.
Yeah, McElroy said that on our show in Birmingham a couple of times. You guys forget the level of quarterback that he's been very successful with. And it has not always been, Caleb Williams and, guys that have gone in the first round, even a Bo Nix per se. I think Peyton Thorne's got it in him. I've watched the Michigan State film. I've seen it. I've seen him be successful. I think a couple of things were happening last year. Number one, those receivers could not separate. They weren't open. And it honestly, not even always about being open. There weren't windows to try and complete footballs to them. I think that caused some of that hesitation from Peyton Thorne at times. Also, I think the offensive line was probably worse than I anticipated it would be last year. He didn't have a lot of time at different points during the season. I think this year you kick Dylan Wade down to guard. Jeremiah Wright looks like he's coming along. I think Connor Lew is going to be one of the best centers in Auburn history. I mean, he's got all the ability, all the talent to be that kind of a player. And you got a tight end that was the guy who really got you out all your jams last year. I mean, he was the only consistent player catching the football. Now you bring in not just a receiver or two, you bring multiple receivers in that are upgrades across the board with what you had that are different type guys. So you have a Cam Coleman that's your big body physical receiver guy, go attack the football, kind of an eraser, get your quarterback out of trouble, if you will. You go get a kid from Georgia State that's more of a catch and run threat that can take your high percentage throws, your screens, and turn those into 15, 20, 50-yard gains. You go get a receiver from Penn State that I feel like is kind of B plus A minus across the board. He's not the best route runner, but he's a good route runner. He's not the fastest guy in the field, but he's fast enough to get past you. He's got good hands, not just going to always beat you with his hands. Like, he's just solid. He's an upgrade over every receiver they had and everything that he does last year, and he might be their third best option. So, and then if you get another receiver or two of the youngsters coming in that helps, that's just an added bonus. And people forget Jarquez Hunter's still there, man. Like, Jarquez Hunter, you could make an argument he's the best running back in the SEC right now.
Yeah.
Gotta be. So if the offensive line does improve, and I think the middle, similar to what we talked about with Alabama, the middle is going to be good. Tackle's still a bit of a question mark. I'm not sold on Percy coming in and just locking down the left side and that being great. And then you got Too Tall on the right side, Xavier Miller, who has been pretty good at times, but consistency needs to come along. It could be better. And if the offensive line's a little bit better and the receiver room that has been completely revamped is a lot better, which I think it will be, Peyton Thorne doesn't have to be somebody who throws the ball 425 times and throws for 4,200 yards and 38 touchdowns. He doesn't have to be that guy, because he also showed at the end of the year he can break you down with his legs a little bit. So if all of those things kind of take a little bit of a step, I think Auburn's got some room for improvement. The ceiling, that's tough. Could they be, top third of the SEC? I don't know if they can make that big of a jump. A little bit past the top half of the SEC, I think that's possible. I think that's feasible. I think if you're looking at the quarterbacks in this league that have a chance to make the biggest jump, I don't know what kind of odds you could get or how you would wager on it, but Peyton Thorne would probably be a good bet there, because people view him right now as the, 12th, 13th, 15th best quarterback in the league.
Sure.
Could he finish in the top half? I think it's possible with his skill set and the guys around him and Hugh having more of his fingerprints on that offense. I think it's feasible he makes that kind of a jump.
Well, and I think it's interesting, too, because talking about the offensive linemen and wide receivers, you mentioned Jarquez Hunter in passing, but it's also their entire running back room. Almost all of their production returns. So if the offensive line's better, the wide receivers take a little bit of pressure off. Think about Hugh with all of those options, not with Hunter, but everybody. I mean, the upside is there. I just think for Auburn folks that you just need to see a little bit of it, right? You don't have to go out there and set records. Just show it's going in the right direction, and I think people will be fine. Now, going in the right direction for me for LSU's offense is fascinating, because Garrett Nussmeier is not Jaden Daniels. That's not exactly breaking news or deep analysis. He's just not. The wide receiving room is still pretty solid. You sort of do it by committee at running back, and they have the best offensive line in the SEC, maybe even the country. So all of those things combined, assuming that the defense is not going to be horrendous, what can LSU do this year?
I think LSU can make a push for the playoff this year, just because, number one, they have that kind of talent. I mean, you mentioned it. Regardless of what you think of Garrett Nussmeier as an SEC quarterback, he's got ability and a ton of ability. You've just got to dial him down mentally and emotionally a little bit. And if you can get him to act as more of a operator of the offense, a game manager, and I know people take that in a negative connotation, but that's not the way I mean it. That's the first thing a
quarterback is supposed to do.
And when you have an alien like Kyron Lacey and CJ Daniels is coming in, and you got Mason Taylor at tight end, and like you said, maybe two of the best 5 or 6 tackles in the country. I think the best offensive line in the country going into the season. Doesn't really matter what you have at running back at that point. They've got a couple good ones. You just kind of manage this thing. Let your playmakers go make plays. Don't turn the football over. That's the scary part to me, is if you go back and just look at how he's played, his numbers, he has a tendency to give the ball back. His deep balls hang in the air for a really long time. And in this league, in any league, really, that could be problematic. And he's got guys that can go take the football away from him, but you're going to give the football away a couple of times if you keep doing that. So I like the potential of the offense. I worry about the defense, and I think Blake Baker's great. But hell, three of your four best players on defense were on that defensive line last year, and they're gone. And it was gross last year. Now you have two, maybe three scholarship defensive tackles on this team. If they have a interior defensive lineman injury issue early, it's going to be a long year for that LSU defense. So the offensive line better be good, and the run game better be great, because they're going to have to keep the football, and they're going to have to keep that defense off the field. So I'm with you on the potential. I think they could make a push at the playoff, but also, and they're like a couple of teams in this league, they're an injury or two away from, I think, probably eliminating themselves from playoff discussion.
I think a lot of folks have talked about Billy Napier and the hot seat and all this other stuff. And it seems like a lot of people are trying to put a number on it, wins and losses, because the schedule is so tough. And I'm never one of those people where it's like, look, a 7-5 can look a zillion different ways. Right. And as I think for Florida, 7-5 is going to be pretty unimpressive, but it depends on the 5 that you lose to. But in terms of what you want to see on the field, throw wins and losses out. What does Florida need to do to give Florida fans and administrators faith that Billy is the guy?
Be more responsible defensively, not give yards away, not allow opponents to steal yards from you by being misaligned or blowing assignments, and come up with more explosive plays offensively. I think Florida was able to grind you away last year. Like they were able to play ground and pound. That's something that they can do well with intermediate throws, bootlegs, running the football. They can find those yards. It's just in today's college football, you can't win a lot of games that way unless you're just dominant at doing that. And they weren't dominant, but they were really good. And then defensively, you're just giving up plays down the field. You can't let that happen. You can't allow a quarterback to leave the pocket and go for 20, 30, 40 yards multiple times in a game and happen over and over and over again. So I think if you see more responsibility on defense, a defense that plays more sound, that at least the yards that they're giving up are earned, and on offense, you find a way to create some more explosives and you're more competitive that way, I wouldn't really care about the record as much. I'm on record saying that I think they exceed expectations. I think there's a lot of logo mania when people look at that schedule and they just automatically think, oh, that's that team, they're going to be good, or that's that team, they're going to lose. Miami didn't win 8 games last year. Central Florida didn't win 8 games last year. And there are people that are just chalking those up as losses. And I know Miami's got a ton of talent coming back, and Cam Ward may make them very different. But I hadn't seen him in that uniform. I've seen him play a lot of street ball. I mean, a lot of times he's an and one quarterback, just running around trying to make a play. And so is that going to work in that offense? I don't know. I mean, one thing Tyler Van Dyke would do is get rid of the football. So I don't know exactly how that game's going to go, but there's some uncertainties with Miami also. And there's just like everything we just said about LSU. I mean, there are a ton of question marks. You lose 2 first-round receivers, a Heisman Trophy winning quarterback. It's like, is it just going to be as good? I don't know. Defensively, is it going to be that much better? I don't know. So, and Florida was in that game last year. So there are just a lot of games on that schedule that I think people look at and say, loss. And I kind of don't really view it that way. I think the defense will be more responsible. I think the D-line has a chance to be pretty salty. I think the offensive line is going to be better. I love Montrell Johnson. This Trevor Ball kid at running back is going to be an animal. 235 pounds, and he can move. He's got quick feet. He's got lateral quickness. You just got to find another weapon or two on the perimeter that can help Graham Mertz find some explosives down the field. Because, like I said, you can't dink and dunk your way into 9, 10, 11 wins in this league anymore.
No, you can't. Last one, let's go to Rocky Top with, I think a lot of folks are looking at Nico Iamaleava and saying, okay, yeah, he's Joe Milton. Like, oh, he had a good bowl game, but let's just – and look, right. I think anybody that watched Joe Milton play football before his final season understood he can throw the ball out of the room, but he doesn't have a changeup. Nico is more talented than him, just raw talent. Tennessee has one of the best defenders in the country coming back in Pierce. From a front seven standpoint, they're pretty darn solid. What should be the ask of Nico for Tennessee fans if they want to flirt with the playoff?
You've got to be efficient making decisions in that offense, first and foremost. It's going to go through him. That offense is just built for it to go through the quarterback. So depending on how defenses are playing you, if that alley defender's coming down in the box, you've got to hit those quick throws on the perimeter. If teams are going to play you man on the outside, you've got to hit a pretty high percentage of those deep throws if that's what they're giving you as far as one-on-ones trying to take the run game away. I don't think he has to be 5,200 yards and 50 touchdowns for them to go to the playoff. I think he just needs to be more efficient, and whatever the defenses are giving him, he needs to take it and he needs to be efficient doing that. I think my concern about Tennessee is a little bit what we talked about earlier with one or two guys being gone. I think they are 2-3 key players away from subtracting a game or two in the loss column. I think Keenan Peely is critical. I just think they need him off the ball, and they need a playmaker like that on defense. I think Mays is critical at center. I just don't think they have another guy like him that can come in. Physically, they might, and that's capable of doing those things, but mentally and emotionally, just handling all of it, I don't think they have another guy like him. And also, too, I think at running back, I don't know if they're as deep at running back as they've been in the past, and they're pretty explosive with what Dylan Sampson can be. You talk about hitting home runs. I mean, he can hit the home runs and make you pay for playing them a certain way. And that's how you force that offense to be what you want it to be. And I think they want it to be one where they can hand it off 40 times. And they're inserting the tight end, and they're running split zone, and they're changing things up, and the quarterback keeps it every now and then. They don't want to have to throw it down the field. But if you play them that way, they'll just keep handing it off. And we saw them do it up there at Missouri a couple of years ago. So I think those 3-4 players have to stay healthy. And if they do, this is the best defensive line I've seen at Tennessee in, 8, 9, 10 years.
Sure.
I mean, physically inside, the depth that they have is on par or past anybody in this league. There's not many teams that have 4 real interior defensive linemen that can be above average in this league, that you feel comfortable putting in, playing, it can go, and then add a legitimate edge rusher on the outside with that. There's not a lot of teams can say that. So whatever the secondary is, young, new, better than last year, same as last year, it might not matter that much because that front's going to be pretty damn good. And the offensive line has a chance to be great if Zalance Hurd comes along at the opposite tackle spot of John Campbell, who's one of the best tackles in the league, and if they stay healthy. Because like I said, I think Mays is that important to it. And I think Nico has the potential to be a great quarterback. Joe Milton was going to be a great thrower of the football. I don't think he was ever going to be a great quarterback, and it's not really a knock on him. It's just kind of physically, we all have our limits. It's who he is. But Nico's different. Nico has those change-ups you've talked about. He understands ball velocity, speed, tempo of the football. He knows how to get the ball out on time. Like he's much more smooth than Joe Milton was ever going to be. And if he's just efficient with how to run it and has a full understanding of it, I think Tennessee can be really dangerous this year.
I agree. So it'll be fun. It'll be fun to see how the SEC shapes out this year. Tell the listeners and viewers what you got coming on for SEC Media Days.
I'll be there with McElroy and Cubic in the morning, 7 to 10 a.m., jocksfm.com. Be on set a little bit with the SEC Network. And I will try to spit some content out from Cube Show, my podcast. You can catch that. Apple Podcast, Spotify, YouTube. Please subscribe. And I think that's it.
Maybe more. I'll see you on Radio Row.
We'll throw some Sirius XM in there probably too. Do a little bit of that.
That's right. Hey, you know what? I gotta find my way onto that desk too. See you down there, Cole.
All right, Barrett. Thanks, man.
All right, appreciate Cole hopping on. Cole's a great guy. I've known him for a long time, and he does a great job. Arch Manning also does a great job. At what? Oh, yeah, keeping himself in the news. Remember when he said he wasn't going to be part of the college football game? Well, that changed. This morning, he announced that changed. Look, the dude's a backup. His name was Arch Smith. He wouldn't have all those stars attached to his name. He wouldn't be an SEO darling. And he certainly wouldn't be noticed enough for me to say, or anybody else to say, hey, it's surprising that he's back in the game. Who cares? He'd just be a backup. That will do it for this edition of College Football Smothered and Covered. Of course, we are brought to you by Bet Online. See that fancy logo right there? Bet Online. You can use promo code BLEAV, BLEAV, and you'll get 50% bet credit on your first deposit of $250. And look, whether it be blackjack, poker, 150 slots, I got everything over there. Use promo code BLEAV. You can get that offer for you. Until next time, have a great Tuesday or Wednesday morning, depending on when you're listening or watching, and we'll talk to you soon.